Good evening, everyone. Welcome to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. I request Professor Day to start with the proceedings. Thank you.
So, thanks a lot, Ritika. So, good evening, friends. Today I joined from a village of Bardhaman, prosperous village, agriculturally prosperous, you can say. So, as all of you know that we are having a series of talk on the state of economic development in South Asia under eco-development discussion series of IMPRI, Impact Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. So our today's talk will be delivered by Professor Nasir Uddin, and the topic is the state of no landsman. That means the man who does not have any land where to go, either Myanmar or Chittagong or India, where the whole world. So the human rights and the Rohingyas issue. So it is a very pertinent issue in the present socio-political scenario, and it has not only to do with the policies of the particular government, either government of Myanmar or government of Bangladesh, but it is the issue related to the whole United Nations rather, all over the world rather. They have to think, and today it may be the issues of the Rohingyas, tomorrow it is somebody else, the Africans or any other areas. So that is the thing. So as I was whole day touring, so I cannot give much introduction about Professor Nasir Uddin. Only just I can tell that before this series, we had a discussion on the environmental issues, on the rural development issues, on the foreign trade issues, on the financial aspects, and the experts from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Bhutan, they all participated. Even the expert from Bhutan talked about the environmental issues that is related to the design of housing that will help in conserving energy and other things. So various aspects we have covered so far. So today is that one socio-political issues which is very much pertinent, and we will look forward to you, Professor Nasir Uddin, and we are fortunate that you could spare your valuable time to have this discussion with us. Now, if possible, I request Dr. Arjun to give a brief introduction of Professor Nasir Uddin, and then the floor will be open to you, Professor. Please.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Day. And we are also fortunate to have Dr. Ken McLean joining us from Clark University, USA. Very kind of him to join this early morning. And he's also the subject expert in this area. So we thought to gain from his vast experience. We also have Dr. Niranjan Sahu, Senior Fellow at Observer Research Foundation, ORF from India, to contribute to the deliberation. And of course, Professor Utpal Day. Anshul, are you there?
Yes.
So Anshula will, yes, quickly introduce, give a brief bio of Professor Nasir Uddin. Anshula, go on.
Yes. Dr. Nasir Uddin is a cultural anthropologist based in Bangladesh and professor of anthropology at the University of Chittagong. Dr. Uddin studied and researched at the University of Oxford, UK, School of Oriental and African Studies at London University, the London School of Economics at London University, Heidelberg University, Germany, VU University, Amsterdam, Ruhr University, Bochum, Germany, Delhi School of Economics, India, the University of Hull, UK, Kyoto University, Japan, and the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh. His current fields of interests include migration and refugee studies, trans-border movement and border unmaking, indigeneity and identity politics, state and everyday life and the politics of marginality, migration and urbanization, the Rohingya, the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and South Asia in general. He has achieved a good number of prestigious awards and fellowships, including the MEX Scholarship, the British Academy Visiting Scholarship, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation Fellowship, a visiting scholarship at LSE, and a visiting fellowship at Oxford University. He has published scholarly pieces extensively with globally leading publishing houses, including the Cambridge University Press, the Oxford University Press, the University of Pennsylvania Press Routledge, Sage, Springer, Palgrave, Macmillan, Bergan, Bloomsbury, Orient Black Swan, and so on. His latest edited books include Life in Peace and Conflict, Indigeneity and the State in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, Indigeneity on the Move, Varying Manifestation of a Contested Concept, and Deterritorialized Identity and Transborder Movement in South Asia. His latest book is The Rohingya and an Ethnography of Subhuman Life. Welcome, sir.
So much of your work actually related to that identity crisis that we observe in Northeast India as well, that Assam Accord and other things, and Naga issues, broader Naga issues and such other things. So I will be very much delighted also to have this, and these are Rohingya issues, genuine issues. So yes. The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Professor Uddin, you are muted. Kindly unmute.
Yeah. Please unmute yourself and do. Yeah.
We just lost the screen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I hope everything is fine.
Yes, so you can go full screen. Please.
Thank you so much, Anshola Mehta. That's wonderful and generous introduction. And thank you, Professor Utpal Dey, and thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar, for inviting me to give a talk. I would say it's kind of sharing my research and experience of long-term engagement with the refugee issues, particularly Rohingya people. And thank you also, Dr. Ken McLean, for accepting the invitation to be a discussant for the session. So I will actually share, this is what at the beginning, what I will say is I'm not an anthropologist, something like that. Just, I did just visit at the field and I spent some time there and took some notes and just came back and wrote down a kind of, an ethnography. I have a kind of long-term, almost a lifelong engagement with the issue. So that's why when I give a talk, it's not something like that I'm just giving or reading out some written stuffs and giving some idea about what I do. Actually, I share my experience and my growing maturity with the issues. So when I talk about Rohingya people, is a kind of reflection my long-term research engagement and almost more than 2 decades with the issues and my very typical ethnographic, field work for a long time, and also the different forms of engagement with the issue. So, and also I was born in Cox's Bazar, where the Rohingya people now more than 1 million people living in refugee camps. So this is also something like that I grew up with the issue, and it's kind of this growing maturity. So today I'm talking about what Professor Utpal Dey was talking about. He was talking about the state of no land's man. We are quite familiar no man's land, but I just metaphorically actually altered the word men's and lands. So the beginning, I must clarify that man essentially does not a kind of male component. It's a kind of people. So that should be no lands people. So so someone could consider is a kind of gender sensitive, because men is a very gender insensitive word to understand this the idea of people. So in the beginning, what I would say actually, what I will talk about is very, very brief and very simple. What's the human rights situation of the Rohingya people until today? So in my brief abstract, I wrote about it. For example, this is kind of argument I formulated when I was preparing the abstract, something like that. Every human being holds rights as a human being, which is called human rights, enshrined in international legal framework and globally endorsed jurisprudence. The UN Declaration of Human Rights, endorsed in 1948, confirms that, quote, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedom set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national social origin, property, birth, or other status, unquote. Article 2. So human rights thus are enforced globally and locally, where global frameworks works in the local setting, and the local enactment of different kinds of laws operates complying with the global norms within the state boundary. Human beings therefore enjoy human rights locally and globally under the premise of global justice. However, many states across the world become violators of human rights whilst they are supposed to be protectors or holders. Consequently, hundreds of thousands of people experience serious human rights violation across the world, where states play the roles of catalyst and perpetrators. Given the proposition, my presentation actually presents the human rights of the Rohingya people, one group of those hundreds of thousands of people who have been experiencing commendable human rights violation in the borderland of Bangladesh and Myanmar. So this is a kind of abstract I submit. So what I'm actually trying to say, what does human rights mean? What's the framework of human rights? I would clarify in a way, it's a kind of operational definition, something like that. Human rights are those activities, conditions, liberty, and freedoms that all human beings are entitled to enjoy by the virtue of their humanity as a human being. They include civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Human rights are inherent, inalienable, interdependent, and invisible, meaning they cannot be taken away and must be respected by all. However, only governments are in a position to put in place the laws and policies necessary to protection of human rights and to regulate private and public practices that impact individuals' enjoyment of those rights. Therefore, within the national governments, I mean states, as the guarantors and or the violators of human rights. So that's the point what I will give in my talk. I will discuss the human rights situation of Rohingya people in relations to the states, the way states deals with the Rohingya people. Based on this kind of states dealings, will try to frame or understand the human rights situation of Rohingya people. The framework, something like these are actually, I hope everyone can easily watch this slide. The rights of the Rohingya people, I'm trying to understand under 6 internationally endorsed legal framework, like UN Declaration of Human Rights, you might know, 1948, International Refugee Convention, 1951, the Convention relating to the status of stateless people, 1954, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 1966. And finally, International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, endorsed in 1966. So these are actually the baseline based on which I will basically the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I will take this kind of the tools of analysis of my facts and figures. So first of all, just to give you kind of basic idea about the Rohingya people, this is a major ethnic groups in Myanmar, and the Bamar, Shan, Karen, Rakhine, and Rohingya, Kachin. So I'm talking about Rohingya people and who are living in northern Rakhine state. So this is who are the Rohingyas. Is the basic information. I have intensive readings and study about the historical foundation of Rohingya ethnicity and Rohingya people, Rohingya nationality. Just I'm giving you a couple of ideas. The Rohingya are an ethno-linguistic and religious minority living in Myanmar for centuries, but now majority Rohingya people live in Bangladesh as refugees. They are the descendant of Maoris, Arab, and Persian traders and preachers, Mughal, Turk, Pathan, and Bengali soldiers come migrants who arrived between the 9th and 19th century in Arakan, now what we call Rakhine. Their earlier name of current Rakhine state was Arakan. Rohang, Rosang was the capital of Arakan since 1430. The inhabitants of Rohang were called Rohingya, who were the foreparents of current Rohingyas in Rakhine state. The Rohingyas inhabit the northern part of Rakhine State before August 25th, 2017. More than 1 million Rohingyas used to live in Myanmar. Now the number is around 4 lakhs, we call 0.4 million people. So Bangladesh had been hosting 500,000 refugees before August 25th of 2017. But now it houses more than 1.3 million, but officially it's more than 1.1 million. Rohingya also live in India, Pakistan, Middle East, Malaysia, uh, Thailand, Nepal, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and USA. So this is who are the Rohingya. This is the Myanmar maps. You can see where Rohingya people live. Actually, these townships. And this is Bangladesh. Rohingya people live in Uki and Teknaf, largely this Uki and Teknaf. And this is the newly settled Rohingya refugee camps, to particularly Kutupalong, which is considered as one of the largest refugee camps in the world now. So this is the brief history, because history is also important to know the present. So I'm just giving very basic information. Burma, at the time Burma became independent in 1948. Some Mujahideen carried out an armed rebellion demanding an independent Arakan state for Muslims in 1954, but failed. Even so, the Rohingyas were close to having their autonomy in the 1950s under the democratic government of UNU, but plans were thwarted by the military coup of General Ne in 1962. So since 1962 onward, the history of Rohingyas is full of exploitation, persecution, and discrimination. Muslims were removed and burned from the civil post. Restriction of movement were imposed. Property and land were confiscated, is according to MSF report. So General Ne, who ruled Myanmar, from 1962 to 1988, banned all Rohingya socio-cultural organizations to house the Rohingyas in the country. In 1978, the general launched Operation Dragon that forced 250,000 Rohingyas to enter Bangladesh in 1970. This is the beginning of big influx, actually in 1978. Though most of the Rohingyas were repatriated in 1979, almost 236,000 people, Rohingya, were repatriated, but most of them actually returned again back to Bangladesh. So the Myanmar Citizenship Law, enacted in 1982, conferred nationality to 135 nationals, excluding Rohingya. So 1982 is the year when Rohingya became actually stateless people, because they were constitutionally excluded from the legal framework of the state of Myanmar. In 1991 and 82, more 200,000 Rohingyas fled to Bangladesh and took shelter. This is a second big influx, and more 225,000 Rohingya in 2012 to 2015, and 87,000 Rohingya migrated to Bangladesh in 2016, and more than 750,000 Rohingya migrated to Bangladesh in 2017. Now altogether it's almost 1.3 million, though officially is widely known as more than 1.1 million people. So according to the Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to a nationality, and no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of their nationality. So this is the first case of human rights violations according to UN Declaration of Human Rights. So everyone has every right to nationality or citizenship, because human beings are born through reproduction process. Nobody falls down from the sky. Nobody grew up from the land. So if this is the case, why 12 million people are stateless? According to official statistics, now 12 million people are stateless. So this is the first human rights violation according to UN Declaration of Human Rights. And Myanmar is one of the signatory states of UN Declaration of Human Rights 1948. Then I will move. This is Myanmar Logic. why they are stateless, why they do not have citizenship, why Rohingya people are not entitled to citizenship. What Myanmar's logic is, those whose ancestors used to live in Burma before British occupation in 1824. Since Rohingyas settled in Arakan in recent time, particularly during the British colonial period from 1824 to 1948, so they are illegal Bengali migrants and not entitled to citizenship in Myanmar. This is Myanmar's logic. But I want to present some counter logics because this is absolutely state designed, deliberately fabricated state's narrative to exclude them from the legal status. So counter logic, Rohingyas are the descendants of Maoris, Arab person. I'm not just talking about the history of hundreds, thousands years ago. I'm just giving some latest authentic historical documents to dismantle the state's narrative produced by Myanmar state, particularly from the Buchanan Hamilton's note in 1799, classical journals record 1811, and Joanna Servin's database 1815, and Walter Hamilton's book 1820. All four records were published before British occupied Rakhine, Arakan state in 1824. For example, here, these four classic examples. You might know that Francis Buchanan is one of the renowned and widely accepted historians of these regions. Francis Buchanan published a wonderful article, A Comparative Vocabulary of Some of the Languages Spoken in the Burma Empire. It was published in 1799, where Buchanan categorically clarified he met some people in northern Arakan region who claimed themselves as Rohingya and who spoke in a particular language which they claimed that that's the Rohingya. So it proved that it proves that the people, a particular group of people who claim themselves Rohingya, who spoke in a particular language, Rohingya language, living in northern Arakan, even before British occupied the territory in 1824. Also, classical genre, you might know classical genre is considered as one of the historical data baseline of Southeast Asian region, particularly the 10 Southeast East Asian region, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these regions. So classical journal published one article in 1811, and the page number 107, where it was clearly actually described that a group of people living in this region who claimed themselves and spoke in a particular language is Rohingya. So it was also published before British occupied the territory. And also Joanna Servin Vettens, a German ethnologist, who also wrote about the Rohingya, which was published in German language in 1815. Later, it was translated in English, and I got the original document of German language, and my friend Julia Jimpel, German friend, who translated this manuscript for my book, which was published from Oxford University Press. I used this document there. And also, this is the Walter Hamilton's a big book, big volume, who wrote about the geographical, statistical, historical description of Hindustan and adjacent countries, where he also talked about Rohingya. It was published 1820. So all these authentic literatures confirm that a group of people who were called themselves Rohingya, who spoke in a particular language, Rohingya, who were living there for centuries, even before British occupied the territory in 1824. So it actually is a kind of Myanmar designed this kind of historical narratives to exclude Rohingya. So this is another photographic documents. Burma became independent in 1948, but that was the photo of Rangoon University Central Students Union in 1936. Many of you might know that Rangoon University was one of the radical space at the time to lead the anti-colonial movement during this Southeast Asian region. And in Rangoon University Central Students Union 1936, even before Burma became independent, you can see the M.A. Rashid, a Rohingya, the vice president of Yangon University Central Student Union, and Aung San, the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, was the Secretary General of Rangoon University Central Student Union. So you can easily understand that even before Burma became independent, actually Aung San Suu Kyi's father, Aung San, was actually an activist, political activist under the Rohingya. So Rohingya was the leader of Aung San Suu Kyi's father. So it proves that when Myanmar is talking about or claiming that Rohingya are the illegal Bengali migrants, it doesn't stand because historically it cannot be substantiated. So it's a kind of state's design and fabrication of the history and the reproduction of history according to state's desire. I have another photo. This is Rangoon University Arakan Muslims Association in 1950s, even before Burma became independent. And these all are Rohingya people who formed the political organization association in Rangoon University. And apart from that, these are the a list of member of parliaments who were elected parliamentarians from the Rohingya, nationalities. And they started, they actually led in the parliament, represented parliament until 1990. So how could it be possible for an illegal Bengali migrants to become the member of parliament? So it actually dismantles that. What Rohingya Myanmar is actually circulating, the information, the history is completely baseless and states fabricated and states designs political narratives to justify what they have done so far to the Rohingya people. Professor Utpal De, can you hear me?
Professor Nasir, I am here. Yes, please tell me.
Okay.
I can hear.
Yes.
Because I cannot see Dr. Ken. Suddenly he's logged off.
No, I just put up because signal is poor.
Okay.
Here, yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. So now the question is, how did an illegal person become the vice president of Rangoon University Student Union? And how did some illegal person form an association at Rangoon University? How did some illegal person become the elected members of the parliament of a country? Actually, the answer is quite understandable. Myanmar has distorted the history and created a state-sponsored narrative of history to justify states' atrocities. So this is why the Rohingya people flee Myanmar. So based on my long-term experience and long-term research, I have summed up this kind of in the bullet points because their atrocious living condition in Myanmar, poor human rights situation, forced labor imposition, unexplainable persecution, and confiscation of land and material resources, restriction of movement that virtually confined them, restriction on marriage and education, frequent communal riots executed by some Rakhine Buddhists, and imposition of restriction on their freedom of choices and liberty of leading a human life, experiencing genocide and intense brutality in 2017 particularly. So perpetrators, the state military, ethnic extremist, Buddhist fundamentalist, and NLD constitute a combined forces. So these three are actually considered as the responsible for the sufferings and all forms of, the activities of ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, or genocide. So Rohingya after August 25th, 2017. I'm actually giving a kind of this 2017 until now. I just gave a kind of historical outline, historical background of the Rohingya people. But this is the latest information that actually what happened in August 2017 that forced almost 750,000 Rohingya people to flee Bangladesh and flee to Bangladesh and killed almost 10,000 people were killed. And some sources said almost 25,000 people killed in 2 months. And almost 1,900 women, girls and women were raped, mostly gang raped. and destroying the villages, almost 398 villages completely or partially. Some other sources said almost 500. Wounded and injured almost 50,000 who fled to Bangladesh following 25th of August 2017. So this is a kind of disclaimer. This because I'm going to show some photographs what I should not show because it further dehumanizes the Rohingya people. That's why I need to make a disclaimer as a professional researcher. I need to maintain a kind of professional ethics because the Rohingya people have been represented in a very inhuman way. The photographs is very disturbing. That's why I'm just making kind of disclaimer here. The photographs used here are published ones in different leading media outlets and hence are public. However, the ways the photographs present the Rohingya people as if they are further dehumanized. They were dehumanized, following these Myanmar atrocities, and the media also presented them to further dehumanize them. So I don't want to do that. But I have used here in support of understanding their extreme vulnerable situation, what I call subhuman life. In my book, I just use this term. I'll talk about it later. So this is not because of this. I am further, representing them as a very dehumanized group of people. Rather, I'm actually showing this all published photographs. All these photographs are published and public. So I'm showing these photographs just to prove that their very extreme form of vulnerable situation and their human rights situations. So this is the burning of a village. After burning, this is a village situation of village. So you can understand what kind of domicide took place during this recent massive campaign. So this is this red dotted. Actually, this is I collected this image from Human Rights Watch. Dr. Ken, are you okay?
Yes, I am fine. Everything is good. Please go ahead.
Yeah, because I missed you for some time. Am I right?
I am here. I've seen everything. So please go ahead. I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. So this is the dotted. So all these villages actually were completely burned down. So this is information I collected from Al Jazeera, BBC, Amnesty International, and Human Rights. It's estimated that about 500 villages have completely been burned down. 60% of the Rohingya villages are now in ashes during the first 3 months since August 25, 2017. Major settings and settlements of Rohingya villages in Rakhine State have been massively destroyed. And you might notice recently some report in global media published some reports that their names of the villages have been erased because in the recent map of the Rakhine State. So this is the villages, the image of the villages. This is the villages after the burning down. The whole villages were burned down. So these are the images. What I made the disclaimer because it's an influx situation, because it will give you some idea about the human rights of the Rohingya people also. This is just this is 2017 following August 25th of August, this massacre or genocide or the big campaign perpetrated by Myanmar security forces. Just to give you kind of idea. So life in Bangladesh. Okay, so I'm also telling about it and what kind of, before just go to life in Bangladesh, I'm also, I'm an anthropologist. I have recorded 500 traumatized narratives of these Rohingya people who just crossed the border in 2017 and the early 2018. So I want to read out one case that I recorded in October 2017 in Ukia, Kutupalong, and it's just 500 narratives, one of the 500 narratives I recorded to tap the traumatized situation of this Rohingya people at that time. And in my book, I actually I used more than 50 cases to substantiate my argument, my theory, subhuman life. So I'm reading out just to give you a kind of feel, give you a kind of idea what kind of atrocities actually they did go through. So there's a Maksud who just explained to me as some 47 years old. I'm just reading out his narrative in a very brief, short English translation. Having listened to a big chaos outside, I, with my two daughters, one son of 3 years, and my pregnant, 6 month pregnant wife, fled from back door. 2 days ago, I saw in Bazaar marketplace how the Burmese military and Kichumoggerfua's few Buddhist yachts were shooting and killing many Rohingyas mercilessly. While fleeing, we are caught by Burmese military. They hit me with rifle and I fall down on the ground. Then they took my two daughters away, raped them in a nearby jungle, and shoot them thereafter. I could not even wait to see what was happening to them as I was running to save my son, carrying on my soldier and holding hands of my pregnant wife. After walking 2 days and a night on the hills and jungles, we reached the bank of Naf River. My wife was so tired she could not even breathe because she was pregnant. While we were crossing the no man's land, my wife was suddenly exploded by a landmine and her body became split in a second. I could not even recognize the face of my wife. I crossed the border with other Rohingyas having more or less the similar experience. While I arrived in Bangladesh, I meanwhile lost my two daughters, pregnant wife, my life in Arakan, my land, livings, and my everything. I do not know what to do now, where to go, how to survive. I am just alive without a life. Unquote. So this is what so you can understand easily the human rights situation of Rohingya people. So now life in Bangladesh after coming here, I'm giving some. This is a Kutupalong camp image. Is the largest refugee camps in the world right now. So this is a kind of scarcity of relief, food. This is their living standard. Plastic tent. This is how childs are being reared. So this also violation of child rights. These are the images. So during monsoon, particular rainy season, they actually spend a very hard time. Sometimes they use their time, making some kind of nokshika, this called no. So designing some, clothes and making nets for fishing. And also education means a kind of, it's a religious educations, and there is also reports published in global media. There's a growing tendency of militancy among the Rohingya because it kind of, the militants groups are using this vulnerable space of the Rohingya people. So this is the big crisis is actually water, drinking water. So they need to bring it to one tube well tap water tube well for example, for 50, 20 families like this. So this crisis of drinking water is one of the biggest concerns. So life in Bangladesh, in brief, the poor housing facilities because of plastic tents and no proper education for children. Of course, currently there is a kind of improvement here. And also literally nothing for yachts, lack of good healthcare system, available food but no proper diet, lack of security for women and child trafficking, no rights to work and freedom of movement, and discomfortable relations with the host society. So, but I must admit here that Bangladesh government is actually trying its best to support them because still it's very tough to host 1.3 million refugees. In Bangladesh, it's already overcrowded country, and the region Uki and Teknaf is resource poor area, but still their living conditions not up to the mark, I would say, despite Bangladesh all-out efforts. So this is the tears are the constant companions of Rohingya life, both in Bangladesh and Myanmar. So Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I'm just close to my session. I will take a couple of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes probably. But before that, I want to just recheck with the UN Declaration of Human Rights and the human rights of Rohingya people. I'm just sharing another slide. Just this is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights situation. Just 1 minute. This is yes. So this is officially the United Nations, the Declaration of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So if we start reading, you might know 30 articles in Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For example, number 1, all human beings are born free but equal in dignity and rights, which is not actually Rohingya people are enjoying. Article 2, everyone is entitled to the rights and freedom of set forth in the declarations. They do not have any rights and freedom because Myanmar does not consider them as a citizen. Bangladesh is not considered them even as refugee because Bangladesh position is something like that. Bangladesh is not one of the signatory states of UN Refugee Convention 1951. So in Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. 4, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude or servitude, slavery, and slave trade shall be prohibited in all of their forms. Number 5, no one shall be subjected to torture, cruel. So if we read out one after another, almost all the articles of the human rights, all the articles have been violated in case of Rohingya people. So you can easily understand. Even if you can go, for example, Article 7, Article 8, everyone has a right to effective remedy of the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights, whom they will actually lodge the complaint. So Article 9, Article 10, even Article 15, I say that everyone has the right to nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality or denied the rights to change his nationality because they do not have nationality even. Myanmar stripped of their nationality in 1982. So this is kind of sharing the whole charter of human rights declarations, what Rohingya people are actually deprived of. So I'm just ending my session in a way. So this is the extreme form of vulnerable situation. Again, I'm just saying sorry because I need to present it to show the extreme form of vulnerable situation. I'm just projecting a couple of photos, which are very disturbing photos, but I use these photos to establish that what's the human rights situation of Rohingya people, and also these are very important to understand the subhuman life, the theory I established in my book. So this is, you might know Frantz Fanon's famous book, The Wretched of the Earth. So why this you can see the human rights situations. This is the whole village was burning and people are just running, so this is the kind of atrocious living condition in Myanmar. And this is fleeing a definite death because if they stayed there, they would die for sure. That's why they don't know what to go, but fleeing a definite death to an indefinite life. Nowhere to go, none to say anything, because they do not. Rohingya people do not exist they are non-entity in the world because they are not citizens. They don't belong to any state. So this is the photo actually which created huge, massive criticism against this is the photo which actually drew attention of global media and international community. Living with a burden life, that Homi Bhabha is recently circulating one idea, the burden life. Then Time magazine actually shows made this photo as a cover page. Myanmar shames. I think it's not only Myanmar shame, it's the shame of all of us. A shame for global community. This is not simply a bird life. That in my book, I just talk about it. The bird life, the governments, you might know that the bird life is inadequate to understand the Rohingya situation. This is a life of subhuman life. This is people in the borderland of life and death. So you can understand the human rights situation of Rohingya people. Fleeing in the struggle, just people in the struggle for existence. something like, Darwin's struggle for existence. We know these people are just struggling to exist rather than rights. So this is not a life of non-citizen or stateless people, but a life of subhuman. That's what I explain in details in my book, The Subhuman Life. They are fleeing. Knowledge man. This is the cover page of my book. Knowledge, they have no land. They are just running, but they don't know where to go. Thank you so much. And I must give the credit for using all the photos to AFP, Times, Reuters, Al Jazeera, Guardian, BBC, CNN, Human Rights Watch, the Daily Star, the Daily Pratham Aalo, Bangla Tribune, Amnesty International, Japan Times. Thank you all.
Thanks, Professor Nasir Uddin. I think I am audible now.
Yes, you were quite audible.
Through mobile I am doing, because I gone off from there somehow from my laptop. So anyway, it was very interesting, and definitely what I feel that there was a debate, and Myanmar's government is telling that before 1824, those who were only they are the bona fide citizen of the country, otherwise not, because they are and you get there. But the question is always there, whether before 1824 or not, any person who is contributing to the development of a country once they are living for centuries, how they cannot be the citizen of that country. Citizenship comes either by birth or those who live for some time. Even many countries are there, after 5 years you can get the citizenship if you live there and contribute to their welfare, isn't it? And those who are there for centuries and their next generations, they are born there. So by birth they should be automatically citizen. So they are in that in the question and session, I saw that one person has written also the question that if Article 15 of the UN Human Rights Commission is violated by the government of Myanmar, where UNO is not interfering in this case. So you can give a little clarification. I think some steps UN had taken, but still they could not go beyond a certain limit, that forcing the Myanmarese government to do all these things, because they are giving sometimes excuse that they are involved in some miscreant activities or what you call that, mercenaries activities like that, like extremism, are aberrant, or they are involved in this exterior also, and you cannot drive them out from the country. So people say first they did not come from the ER, so they must have some place to live. Definitely, you are right. And for some bad people, you cannot placard the whole. So that was also some questions raised by the Myanmarese government at some point of time. That is also true. But this counter argument, it can be like that. 1 or 2 persons is bad, so you cannot make everybody bad. So then when government also does mistake, then we can say that they are doing all these things, but we cannot have this type of issue. So why UNO is not going one step forward, and so many powerful countries are there, why they are not? Because it's a geopolitical questions coming, then China is entering in there. So if India goes against the Myanmar, then by giving some benefits to the Myanmar, China may extend their political sphere in the Myanmar, and another new issue will come. And I saw there that though last year I abandoned my trip to your Cox's Bazar also, that time instead I gone to Borisal and other places with a friend. So anyway, but this is definitely, these are the plight of those who are driven out forcefully and are helplessly living there for quite a few years. Because not only those people's food, shelter, everything, but their children's education, next generation are also getting affected. So they cannot go for study properly. Even many of them, not only in Bangladesh, by moving, came to South Chobis Pargana in West Bengal, and even some Jammu Kashmir also. So while moving around, these people, they cannot give proper education to their children. That will be not only malnutrition, that is another issue will be degenerated. If this problem is not solved, many of them may join anti-social activities also because of their frustration. whether it is true or not. What do you think? Because if somebody feels that he is deprived, nobody is taking care of them for over years after years, so they may join also, because no training, no socialization properly, it may also happen, and that can be another big issues, not only for a particular country, Bangladesh, but in the surrounding other countries, they may also face this problem. So this is a big issue, this Rohingyas issues and the aftermath. And now also I don't know whether any abuse, women abuse also have been taking place, because when in the tents many people stays for a long period of time, so it's bound to happen that that atrocities against the gender atrocities that you can say. So that is another thing. So now rather instead of taking long time, I would like to give to the panelists, Professor McLaurin, please, if you can give your comments on Professor Nasir Uddin's arguments here. So Professor
Yes, of
McLaurin,
course.
please.
Thank you, Professor Utpal. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be brief and for the most part pose my comments as questions to invite Professor Nasir to elaborate on some of the concepts he made and to address some of the questions that are coming up in the chat, which I also have some quick views. So I'm going to focus sort of on 5 issues. You are welcome to respond to them or not as you see fit. But the first one that the chat came up with is something else I wanted you to elaborate on. You began your talk with no lands man, and you explained the issues related and why you reversed the terms. And it sounded somewhat descriptive or metaphorical, but I'm wondering whether it can be an analytical concept, just like the idea of the subhuman, which you develop very nicely in the book. And my question there is, how are those two ideas similar and how are they different? And what does the concept of subhuman allow you to explore or conclude in a way that other concepts used about stateless persons do not? So what is the value added, or what is new there? So as a framing issue to move towards the concrete and to link it to some South Asian issues, because that is your primary audience, I wanted to thank you for a very, very clear discussion of the key issues and how you frame them in terms of international human rights law. But I want to focus on one quick point here, and that is international human rights law is by definition about the law. It is about a global framework and explains the rights and obligations of states towards people within their boundaries. But the concept of the national race, which is the one in which Myanmar defines its citizenship, is biological. So you've got a clear conflict between a legal concept and a racialized biological one, which is part of this issue of logics and counter logics. So you're seeing a global definition and a local definition in conflict. And the question becomes, how do you resolve that idea of universal and the local in particular? All right. So my questions to you, first to revisit the counter logic. Given the discriminatory laws and the forms of persecution the Rohingya have suffered for decades now, and the clear hatred of the government, the security forces, and the ordinary people, not just in Rakhine State, but nationwide, complicating that the issue is not just Myanmar doesn't want the Rohingya, but Bangladesh increasingly doesn't want them either, and for a variety of reasons you can go into or not. Many of them are well known. So where did they go? If third country resettlement is not possible, they either have a protracted stay in Bangladesh, which Bangladesh doesn't want, or they're repatriated to Myanmar, which is problematic because, as you know, the politics, the violence, the ethno-nationalism of extremist Buddhists, hate speech, and of course, legal obstacles, and not just the 1982 law on citizenship, but many other laws, national and Rakhine state laws. So if the principle of repatriation is it has to be safe, it has to be voluntary, and it has to be dignified, conditions do not exist for those three. So unless Bangladesh violates international law and the principle of non-refoulement, you're at a standoff, right? The other quick point I wanted to mention, and this picks up on a comment Professor Utpal made a moment ago, is that you were narrowly focused, and understandably so, on Bangladesh, Myanmar, and the conditions that drove the Rohingya out and the problems they face on the Bangladesh side in the refugee camps. But there's also a regional issue about India wanting to have greater influence in Myanmar, and of course the role India plays in Bangladesh, which is always problematic, and China's desire to have greater influence in the region, and it has backed a repatriation plan that has since fortunately not gone forward. So if you were to step back and take a regional perspective, and also perhaps consider Muslim countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Gulf states, which also host a lot of Rohingya in the diaspora, how do you see them playing on a role, positive or negative, in trying to find a solution that works for everyone, but most especially the Rohingya themselves? So I'll stop there, and you can respond or you can ignore all my questions. It's up to you. So I leave it, the floor is back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Should I continue?
Yes.
Should I respond to the
Professor Nasir,
questions?
yes, if you would like to, or we also have Dr. Simi Mehta. She can also, yes, come in with some good points.
Taking all notes and responding to one after another, it should be nice.
Yes, so that you can also take some break after your lecture. Yes.
Okay.
Simi?
Okay, Dr. Arjun. Dr. Arjun, is there any other panelist from outside or no?
No problem. We have Dr. Simi Mehta. Simi, go on.
Dr. Simi, then you please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor Nasir Uddin. It was such a wonderful lecture and wonderful presentation, and that has been supplemented by Dr. Ken as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. Thank you. Professor Nasir Uddin, you have provided an elaborate clarification about the belongingness, or the whole idea that the Rohingyas belong to Myanmar, along with extensive literature to support it. Support this argument. You've also provided an explanation that there was some sort of a tolerance in the Aung San government, which actually then continued, and it actually continued until 1990, and then things began to change. So what transpired after that? And that there has been such a struggle to wipe off their total identity, history, and also relegate them to subhuman life, as you so call it. You have also shown how villages have been burnt down, and they have actually been forced and also been traumatized to cross the border and migrate to Bangladesh. You really briefly mentioned about the Bashanchar Island, off the coast of Bangladesh, where they are being forcefully relocated to, and it has some reports have also come that this island is not very eco-friendly. It is cyclone and also flood prone. Humanitarian organizations have not been really engaged in such a conversation in taking this decision. And things are not very clear as to what kind of amenities would be provided to the people who would be migrating there. In fact, many of the early evidence that has come up, it is being clear that they do not want to go. the Rohingyas do not want to go, and they feel that the situation could be a prison-like situation. And even the United Nations Technical and Protection Assessment has either not been given due consideration nor been taken into account. So, what do you think? Who should be held responsible for this? And on the one hand, human life actually means that it comes along with the basic human rights tenets, which you really focused so clearly. So in this, the whole idea of International Court of Justice coming into the picture, and unfortunately, we still are continuing with Nobel Peace Prize certification to the leader there. Aren't these contradictory? I mean, these are some contradictions that really need to be resolved so that we have a clear picture, because human rights are very important for the entire realm of humanity living there. So these are my initial comments. I will come up in the next round if there's time. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Dr. Semi. Actually, you are right that once at one point of time we used to consider that this Aung San Suu Kyi was the real fighter and against the anti-human rights, all these things. But during her regime, all these things happened. Anyway, Dr. Arjun, please go ahead.
Yes, or Prof. Uddin, would you like
Dr. Arjun, please go ahead.
Yes, or Prof.
Yes.
Would you like to collect and come to this?
Sure. Sis, first of all, thank you so much, Professor Utpal and Dr. Ken and Dr. Simi. It's always engaging. I always enjoy receiving very critical comments, what I cannot respond to. But unfortunately, I can respond to most of the questions, because discussions, comments and questions always helpful for the presenters, further clarification or modification of the idea, sensing, interpretations, always helpful. So thank you so much for the wonderful comments and wonderful questions. Actually, questions and answers, the kind of dialectic process that we could go through. So first of all, Professor Utpal De, what you actually said is responding to you first, is you are absolutely right. When people migrated to the place and are not, it should not be considered 100 years ago, 200 years ago. This is, it's very nonsense, because the citizenship is something else. But I didn't focus on the citizenship, Myanmar internal legal, battle, and the global frame of citizenship, all these stuffs. I just tried to dismantle the state's narrative, why they were actually excluded from the from the legal framework of Myanmar as a nationals, what they call nationals. That's because the narratives was completely baseless. That's actually I tried to focus on. But I personally believe that citizenship should have very little to do, actually have nothing to do when people arrive, because the history of human civilization is the history of migration. So actually 200 years ago, when people who came to Myanmar or who did not, that should not be the considerable point. So I do fully agree with you why Myanmar excluded them from the citizenship framework is a complete violation of the Article 15 of Human Rights Declarations. So I do fully agree with you. And go back to Dr. Ken. Yes, very good questions I've received. First of all, yeah, UN Declaration is not a law, but is a kind of guidelines, or you can say it's a kind of norms. But states which endorsed this UN Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, when states enacts its own law, always complies with the UN declarations, so that there's not a kind of contradiction. So states, Myanmar and Bangladesh, or in particularly Myanmar, Bangladesh, two states, they are the signatory states of UN Declaration of Human Rights. So what I would say, Myanmar actually, before enacting citizenship law in 1982. There is no such a law to exclude them in the legal framework of the state. But Myanmar state particularly very intentionally designed this legal framework because they are the illegal migrants. So those who are illegal migrants are not entitled to citizenship. That's the legal framework of actually Myanmar state, which altogether complies with the UN declaration and altogether comply with their local legal framework, because according to national citizenship law, Rohingya people are not entitled. That's the point. And you might know there's a kind of colored classification of citizenship in Myanmar. So all these are kind of state design. So I'd say that's the one point. So this is a very states, policy. In my sub-human life, I'm talking about it. And you also talk about it. I received a couple of questions about the bird life and subhuman life. And you also wanted me to clarify more about the subhuman life. Yes, actually, this is a wonderful background. I'm just giving a very brief idea. In 2012, in Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University organized a workshop. It's a very intensive workshop on the state of stateless people across the world. The globally, almost now 12 million people are stateless. According to UN declaration, everyone is entitled to citizenship. So why then 12 million people are stateless? That's what we worked on. And finally, we came up as, almost 12 scholars across the world. We attended the workshop and we talked about intensively about this citizenship literature. And we came up with a solution, with the kind of idea that citizenship is a very slippery concept. And we found that at the time, and I contributed one chapter, and our seminar outcome was published from the University of Pennsylvania Press, and I wrote one chapter, State of Stateless People, on the Rohingya people. Then actually the idea came to my mind that the established theoretical domain in academia, which are actually quite frequently used to understand the particular category of people like refugee, like asylum seekers, camp people, forcibly migrate, displaced people, and all this stuff. So I saw then stateless, non-citizens. I found that almost all theoretical establishment is something different, that we considering people as a kind of legal object. For example, bird life. According to bird life, even if you say Hannah Arendt's rights to have rights, if you have citizenship, you have all rights. If you go to this Wengel rejected people, if you can see the Judith Butler precarious life, and almost the all theoretical establishment consider people as kind of legal category. Because so I found that then this is not this is my critique, that so this is kind of academic justification of the vulnerability, because Rohingya people are like this because they do not have citizenship. So Syrian people, so this is the kind of, then I found that who actually, which came first, state or who came first, or people in the human civilization? And definitely people came first, and state came next. So what state did? State actually, emergence of state made people a legal category. This passport, this citizenship, bought all these stuffs actually. So then the idea came to me, and I found, when I told you, on more than 2 decades I've been working on the Rohingya people, and I time and again I was listening that this is not a human life. এটা কোনো মানুষের জীবন না, কুত্তার জীবনের চেয়ে ভালো. It means it's not a human life. Even animals deserve some care. But the ways we dealt with, as if we are not a human being, we are less than human being. That's a local term, actually. I found it on the ground. Rohingya people say, some human life, their narratives. What I did, I actually substantiated. Yes, that's the point. This was starting from the 2012. I started working on it, and I just time and again, I extensively read all the literature, almost available literature on the citizenship, refugeehood, camp peoples, Nando's campjanship theory, almost is legal. That I said no. Rohingya people The ways they are dealt with is not because of their non-citizen, they are stateless. Because there are a lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people across the world who have citizenship, who belong to a particular state, but who experience a kind of extreme form of vulnerabilities, like Syrian people. Syrian people belong to a particular state. Syrian people have citizenship, but why did they go through so extreme vulnerable situations? So you can find many people across the world. It's not related with the citizenship and stateless alone. There are other, is that's the idea actually came to my mind. Then I substantiated in the ways. So the available literature which consider stateless people, non-citizen people as a legal category is actually inadequate to understand the situation of Rohingya people. So this kind of inadequacy creates kind of space for theoretical alternatives. That's what I framed based on my long-term ethnographic evidence and details. And subhuman life is a life lesser than human being. They're a group of people who were born in the human world, but the world doesn't own them. So these are the categories. You read my book. I just clearly explained a couple of 5 conditionalities that qualify a group of people as subhuman life. So that's the difference between bird life and subhuman life and other established theories to understand non-citizen, stateless people, illegal migrants, camp people, forcibly displaced people, asylum seekers, all the scholarship. So that's the answer to this question. Very brief. So I could give another talk later about my subhuman life. And just to give you a footnote, and when I just frame this kind of idea, I travel across the world. For example, I just give talk at the Canada, for example, University of Toronto, University of York, University of Waterloo, and I did visited, America. I gave talk University of Columbia, NYU, New School, University of Delaware, University of Cornell, and I gave just about my subhuman theory. And I visited UK, and I gave talk in the University of Oxford, University of Cambridge, UCL, LSE, SOAS, and I did go to Australia, and I give talk in Sydney, in the Melbourne, Adelaide, the whole world I traveled. And I just circulated my idea, and I collected kind of info. And in 2018, I was a visiting fellow. I got a visiting faculty position in Oxford University Center for Refugee Study Centers. At the time, actually, I framed this my theory, and it's published by Oxford University Press. That's the background. And yes, it's many people are talking about it, and just a lot of discussions going on. I hope it will continue, and I hope I will be enriched through comments like you and Dr. Simi also. And and your discriminatory law, your point is very. I would just reflect on it, that what's the solution, the repatriation issue, where do we go? That's a big question. Actually, whenever I give any sessions, there's a common questions I face, and I have been responding these questions, time and again for years. Yes, based on my long-term research and experience, I would say the future of Rohingya people is completely uncertain, because there are 2 repatriation attempts made. One is at 15th of November 2018 and 22nd of August 2019, but failed. Only because Bangladesh, actually from the very beginning, Bangladesh were trying to send them back. That's the only option left for Bangladesh. Because you might know there are 3 international model of refugee problem solution. One is social integration, other is voluntary repatriation, and third one is third country settlement, what you are talking about. So social integration is not possible in Bangladesh at this stage. But the many Rohingyas who migrated in 1978 and 1991, 1992, many people actually integrated in the society. They got married with the Bengali people, and they got the passport, and they just got. So there's one kind of very informal process of social integrations did go through during this kind of time. But now it's very difficult, because there's a kind of changing public discourse. There's a kind of anti-Rohingya sentiment in Bangladesh is going on. So that's once it will not work. And also third country resettlement program, Bangladesh also tried this. And it was started in 2006, and it continued until 2010. And 1,997 Rohingya got resettled in third country. but it stopped in 20. So it doesn't work, and it will not work anymore. So far I understand. But I will back to your questions on Islamic countries. What's their position? But repatriation. So Bangladesh has only one option left. From Bangladesh perspective, is something like that. Bangladesh hosting more than 1 million people only because of humanitarian ground. Bangladesh gave them shelter to save them, but it's not a permanent settlement. It's for time being. So Bangladesh is trying to send them back through this, of course, voluntary repatriation. Since Rohingya people declined to go back, Bangladesh didn't force them to go there. But the point is that Myanmar, there's an agreement, it's called physical arrangement agreement, signed between Bangladesh and Myanmar. But Myanmar didn't take any preparation. So due to their non-cooperation, particularly no preparations for bringing them back. So this is the kind of situation, and I don't know when repatriation will take place the next time, because why will they go back? And there's also kind of tendency we saw that blaming the victims. Rohingya people, we are many people blame the Rohingya people why they are not going back. Why should they go back? There's no preparation to bring them back. And also, UN, I will talk about the UN rules. So this is, I'm so sorry that there is no certain future when repatriation will take place. And what's the such solution to the Rohingya people? And finally, in your response to your questions is, Muslim community. First of all, I actually don't want to consider it a Muslim issue. This is a very sensitive, religiously sensitive issue. Because Rohingya crisis, Rohingya problem is the Muslim issue. But still, for example, there are a lot of people living in Saudi Arabia, you might know, and also Indonesia hosting 150,000 people. And I visited Malaysia, and I saw in Kuala Lumpur, and I saw in Penang, a lot of people. And there's also anti-Rohingya sentiment going on among the Malaysian people. So I don't think this is a kind of Muslim issue. But yes, I will go back to Simi with this point. That's, what's the role of international community? Rather, we could say so. And also, we could go back to Utpal, Professor Utpal, that yes, what's the role of the UN? The serious human rights violations going on, yes. To respond to three of your one questions in a very brief way, is that UN actually is doing nothing, talking too much. They're making just, statement, doing nothing. Because UN Security Council tried to, take action against Myanmar. But, China and Russia, they use their veto power. So, with the UN structure, one of the 5 permanent members of Security Council, even one, it puts veto, you cannot do anything. Just taking resolution. And interestingly enough, from the very beginning, China, Russia, particularly Japan and India, they declared their stand. They're supporting Myanmar. Though India's stand is sometimes, it's a kind of fluctuate, just to maintain a kind of diplomatic norms. Then, we are with Bangladesh, something like that. But in reality, something like that. So that's why I don't think that this is actually, in refugee settlement situation, it's called burden sharing. So Rohingya people, Bangladesh gave shelter to Rohingya people. It's not that it's Bangladesh single burden. And I myself don't use the burden because I don't want to consider Rohingya as a burden. But the realities for the analysis, that what I would say is it's a burden sharing. Everyone shared the burden. The global community should come forward to stand with Rohingya and Bangladesh. To respond to your last questions, yes, no man's land. Then I'll go to Simi. There's some questions very relevant. That's why I answered to this question. So this no lands man, you said use is my analytical framework or my metaphor. Yes, so I use it in every ways. I could use it as a kind of analytical lens because they do not belong to any state. They are deprived of the human rights because according to Article 15, they should have nationality. They should belong to state. So no lands man is actually metaphoric term, definitely. I altered this word, but you could at the same time take it as an analytical framework of my talk. So, and also you can take it as a kind of not only analytic, it's kind of this essence of my talk, what actually I want to say. So I hope that's all for Dr. Ken, and I will go to Simi, and just Simi's two questions. One is I already responded. One is, yes, until 1962, Rohingya enjoys a kind of, residence of Myanmar, Burma at that time. But when General Ne Win actually took over power, state power in 1962, that's the actually point of beginning of the different kind of atrocities, military rule. And it continued until 1988. But the point is that it actually continued until today, but in different forms. When, still Myanmar state management is heavily militarized. 25% seats are reserved for the military. 3 big cabinets are reserved for the military. So Suu Kyi has a very little power to take decision. So I will talk about Suu Kyi later. But your Bhashan question is very valid and very pertinent. Yes, Bhashan is a kind of, UN did not involve in this relocation process as a relocation. So I would say that as a researcher, this is a kind of, experimental move, because, according to Dr. Ken already we discussed that, repatriation is not working, resettlement, third country settlement is working, social integration is not working. But Uki and Teknaf, there's people like 500,000, 5 lakh, 500,000 people, and Rohingya people are 1.3 million. So local people, host community has been suffering most due to the massive presence. So states also has a duty to take care of host community. This is the only reason to just, to reduce the load of the massive people, to relocate a small number of people to the Bhashanchar. And the point is that Bhashanchar, yes, human rights organizations, particularly Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and Fortified Rights, they actually raised the objections about this, because the Bhashanchar emerged just 20 years ago. According to their claim, this is not livable. But, Bangladesh is one of the role model for disaster management globally, because the coastal people, floods, cyclone, there's a lot of, disaster management is one. So before bringing them there's a kind of intensive study of 176 years of cyclone and, a kind of tornado about this island region. And based on the findings, the island is prepared in a very protected way, almost 9 feet high embankment is set up there, and the schools were there for the kids, for the children, and also there's a kind of security systems and much better, the UN standard of living place for the individual refugee is also maintained. It's kind of UN standard of camp. So that's the state's narratives of relocating there, just to unload the massive presence of Rohingya people in Uki and Teknaf. But I, as a researcher, what I would say, and in Bangladesh also, we had to face this kind of criticism. It could be actually better if Bangladesh state could involve UN in the relocation program. But initially, the UN, so far I know, was absolutely against this kind of, relocation. But later, the preparation was good enough to bring them. But Bangladesh did not involve human rights organization, but 22 NGOs, they formed an alliance to support them. And they're kind of, the livestock rearing system there, and sewing machinery is there, and a lot of, they have their fishing. Many Rohingya people are involved with fishing, so there's a fishing opportunity there. So Rohingya people, only 1,642 Rohingya shifted there. This is a kind of experimental test basis. So if it works, then the next phase will be actually good. And Bangladesh is in dialogue with the UN bodies, international, even European Union. Bangladesh in dialogue with human rights organizations, what they are doing, and Bangladesh is reporting them. What is it? Because UN and other international NGOs are heavily involved in the refugee management in Uki and Teknaf. So without them, Bangladesh really cannot handle these massive refugee situations. But the misunderstanding and a kind of this human rights violation issue came up. It's because Bangladesh actually could involve UN bodies in the relocation process. That's I would say. But I visited Bhasanchar and I saw that it's completely wonderfully designed. All kind of protection measures, have been taken there. So for me, and I definitely, I must say, as a researcher, and I'm very compassionate to Rohingya people because I've been working as a poor people anthropologist. I've big, passion for the people, and I continuously write for the news dailies in Bangladesh and Al Jazeera also. And I must say, Bhasanchar is better, far better living place than Uki and Teknaf. And finally, I will talk about the ICJ, International Court of Justice. This is the Gambia lost the case. And it's actually, I'm a bit critical of this country. Yes, one important part is that the Myanmar committed genocide. That should be proved in a global court, International Court of Justice. That's the one achievement I say. If it is, if it gets positive result. But ICJ has a very limited jurisdiction to do anything because you might see ICJ charter, it has two actually capacity. One is if there is any legal battle between two member states, it can settle it down. But there is no legal battle between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Number two, if there is any legal ambiguities between two member states, it can just give a kind of clarification. But the important part is that Gambia presented, they submitted these petitions, a lot of evidence is there. But interestingly enough, Gambia didn't collect any information by itself. Gambia prepared this petition based on the UN Independent Facts-Finding Commission report in August 2018. So there's a kind of, so the globally and in Bangladesh, the people have a kind of, a lot of hopes that, oh, Myanmar is under trial at ICJ. But to me, I do not think it will bring any change on the ground. The Rohingya people, how Rohingya people will go back to Myanmar? Of course, there is a kind of international pressure, but international pressure is also related to global geopolitical interest. Who will involve? Who will take part in the resolution of this Rohingya problem? It also depends. Why China is supporting Myanmar? It's also geopolitical interest. Why India is not taking clear stand against Myanmar on the Rohingya issue? Bangladesh and India has long, historical relationship. So that's why the point is that the talk, there is a kind of discussion, dialogue, a lot of talks, but on the ground from the Rohingya perspective, I don't find any certain future and hopes. But I would definitely say there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So we are waiting for the light. I would conclude here.
Thank you so much, Professor Nasir. And let me also first congratulate you for your excellent work and so much of global work, plethora of aspects and issues you are dealing with, not just one issue as a researcher, because there are so many fold of things. In this only, we also saw dignity.
So thanks you, Dr. Arjun.
Yes, sir, I'm continuing, no issue. Okay, yes. So from emotions to also international politics also we discussed, but really thankful to Professor Nasir Uddin and also to Dr. Kane to yes, come here and discuss this very pertinent issue. Few points I also thought to submit to this deliberation. That one was that even in this time of pandemic, a lot of things and countries are also going through I would say recession, lockdown, but we are really thankful to have a situation that Bangladesh economy was thriving. Otherwise, as Professor Nasir also highlighted, that the economic rift and what people are also feeling there, that is also becoming an issue, largely because I would say there has been no progress and the issue is at standstill. So I really wanted to ask Professor Nasir that what are the thing, and the place is so beautiful, the whole area, that Cox's Bazar and others. I also got a chance to visit there and see all those things. And one point which Professor Nasir also highlighted, the 1982 Myanmar Citizenship Law. I think that is something, because that has to be, a law, or somehow it has to be incorporated. And in this aspect, I just wanted to know that, sir, what do you think are Myanmar's concern? Why they don't want to, take them, and what are the grievances from the Myanmar side, that there is no progress in your view, and what are the pinpoints or key points which should be talked to come to a realization of any progress in this regard? And really, from 2017, 18, and now 20, we are going to 2021. And sir is saying that he's saying, also seeing no progress as such. And two issues which also I thought to ask, that there is one concern also of the well-being in the camps, 1.3 million, but 12 million, there is more. So it's really cannot be an issue that Myanmar can afford to, cut loose of all the 12 millions. That's a lot of population. So how do you see this, growing? And the other part, I really wanted to know that since the issue at standstill in this camp also, sir, you mentioned about militia of the youth, and we all cannot understand that when you don't have anything, these things can come up. So how do you think this serious is becoming also from the Rohingya people in Bangladesh? And other than one other thing, as a South Asian researcher, I wanted to ask that, as you rightly mentioned, that in other continents also, Europe, or be it America, Latin America, many places these issues are there. Also in India also, and in some parts are, this kind of contestation come. But so did you see, because you really said that you had this discussion at different part of the world, is there anything very unique to South Asia when we compared it to globally? If any particular characteristic which you found, be it political or economic, that I really wanted to also ask. And lastly, I also wanted to, know from you that how do you see the role of the neighboring countries of the South Asia, which are there on this matter? Because the condition as it is, it's really the blot on the, on, I would say, 21st century humanity per se, and our progress as a global citizen. Thank you. And I also wanted to show you some pictures when I visited there, and really looking forward to all this your concluding remarks. So then we can also go to Dr. Ken to come in and chip in for anything. Yes. Yes, Professor Nasir, over to you.
Professor, Dr. Ken probably will say something, and I'll
yes.
make the conclusion one.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, again, I will be brief, but you raised a number of critical points. I will mention very briefly some of the point of views, because it's not a singular point of view from the Myanmar side. One of the things that gets lost in these discussions is the triangular tension between Rohingya interests, but Rakhine Buddhist vis-a-vis the Myanmar state and security forces. There's a long-standing feeling amongst Rakhine Buddhists of discrimination against them by the state, neglect by the state in terms of socioeconomic development, and generally speaking, ethnic chauvinism. So while the Rakhine Buddhists are very similar in some respects to the Bama people, the ethnic majority, you can see them as cousins. They do have different histories. Their language does vary. Their religious practice is a little different, and they feel left out. So the attention given to the Rohingya internationally causes many Rakhine Buddhists to say, what about us? We are being left out. We face many, but not all of the same challenges in terms of poverty and poor medical care, poor education, and so on. They feel very neglected. So views from them are very much They're surprised and angry at the support the Rohingya get internationally from their perspective. They make claims that the Rohingya are exaggerating or making up things to get sympathy and material goods that they don't. The national issue is somewhat more complicated. Ethno-nationalism, Buddhist nationalism in particular, has grown substantially since the elections in 2011, but then again 2015, and that indicates a lot of insecurity, especially socioeconomic insecurity, and people think Buddhism, a return to Buddhism, Buddhist values and practices offers some stability and predictability. And of course, to do that, you need an ethnic and religious other, and that makes the Muslim other, because this affects all Muslims in Myanmar and not just the Rohingya, although the most extreme was in the Rohingya. So you get these periodic tensions whenever there is conflict in politically and militarily. The Rohingya gets singled out because it creates unity amongst those factions, because they can all agree that the Muslims and the Rohingya pose a threat internally through overpopulation, intermarriage, and so on, and also the alleged ties with Islamicist groups abroad. The last little quick point I'll make is the 1982 citizenship law is extremely problematic. It does not name the Rohingya, but it's clear to say that the way it was written was definitely to exclude them, resulting in de facto statelessness, because many people prior to that point did not regard the Rohingya as having citizenship. They had certain rights and privileges, but they didn't have citizenship identification. And as an example, this is not limited to the Rohingya. The 2014 census, while problematic for many reasons, found that approximately 25% of all people, regardless of their ethnic identity, their self-identity, did not have ID papers. They had no documentation. So they are in effect de facto stateless as well. So there's a very, very big problem nationwide, not just the Rohingya. Again, although that is the worst case, it's important to recognize that the government has done a very poor job and that the problem is much larger. So I'll sort of briefly stop there. I could continue this, but I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details and bore the audience too much. So I'll stop there. Professor Nasir, did you want to respond or conclude the talk?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what you have say during this round of comments, I have very little to disagree. It's not a question, rather than it's a kind of comments. It's a kind of your observation and your thinking of the issue, and I do not have actually much to disagree. Yes, we should, of course, is not, if you single out the Rohingya people and just talk about their situation, there are many other ethnic minorities, particularly in Rakhine State, particularly recently Arakan army, they are under serious threat. So yes, we should focus on them too. But my talk is basically on Rohingya human rights. That's why I basically try to focus on here. And apart from that, Chin, Hill, the Karen and Shan, there are a lot of people, they have been in, trouble in a state, in atrocities for decades, even since 1948. So I do agree fully with you. And just to give you a kind of footnote, recently I got a kind of an opportunity to talk about this Rakhine situation and what should be the possible ways to improve the human rights situation in Myanmar. And the session was organized by UN. So at the time, there's a big kind of cry from every end that actually the problem lies with the Myanmar, the democratization of the Myanmar, and we should boast of the UN values to mutual coexistence, cultural plurality, multi-ethnic society. This kind of values we should promote, and it's only possible through the democratization, real democratization of Myanmar. Otherwise, we can talk, we can give talk, we can hold seminar, UN can, adopt resolutions, but it will bring no change at the end of the day. So that's why I have not so much to say what you ended with your last round of talk, because I do agree. And just to respond to Dr. Orjun, as you said, a couple of questions is a lot of questions, and I need to take another session to respond to all the questions. But to be very brief, one or two questions, yes. Yeah, particularly a couple of why Myanmar is not taking them back. Why Myanmar will take them back? Here's the big questions, because Myanmar is a kind of design, and also there's a kind of economic activities going on in Rakhine State. You might know this is a kind of extensive economic zone, and China has been already invested almost $7.3 billion there, and also this industrial park is being going on there. So it's a lot of economic interest. So they need lands and they need to net kick them out. So there's a lot of issues involved. So it's really difficult from Myanmar to bring them back at this stage. But what we are talking about in under the framework of global justice, under the framework of UN Declaration of Human Rights, we are talking about the Rohingya rights. Sorry, but from Myanmar perspective, I don't think they will be willingly bringing them back. And about the Suchi, what actually Professor Utpal was talking about, and you also talked about it. Suchi, I don't think that Suchi, Nobel laureate is a kind of Western, representation of, democratic iconic, politics. Suchi, because Suchi, there is no alternative except Suchi in Myanmar during the Suchi has a lot of history of sacrifice. Her father was killed, and her husband was died, but she even could not go there. So she was in prison, house imprisonment. So a lot of sacrifice actually she made. But we should keep in mind that the democracy democracy is actually kind of populism. So entire the figure of Suchi, what we see is actually based on Bamar ethnic populism. So it is actually kind of suicidal for her if she takes stand against this the popular popular majority sentiment, and she takes stands for Rohingya. Actually, this is a kind of suicidal for her. And just to give you one additional information, you might know the Suchi got additional votes in November 8 elections in comparison than 2015 is only because one of the reasons that Suchi supported Myanmar military, Myanmar atrocities, she supported at International Court of Justice. That's why she became popular. So you could really understand that actually when she's based on Bamar populism and popular Buddhist sentiments. So it is really is I think it's unwise to expect too much from her. Within the she is globally unpopular now, but locally she's getting popular. So this is actually at the end of her career of life. You know, this is the kind of suicidal for her to take any stand. That's how I would respond to. And yes, South Asia, yeah, I would say the South Asian, I edited one volume and I wrote a wonderful introduction there, and I would suggest you to read it if it's possible. This deterritorialized identities and transborder movements in South Asia. Why hundreds of thousands of people are moving from one state to other states? And I draw up in the kind of I made a kind of genealogy of migrations in South Asia. Once upon a time, it was basically kind of migration was motivated by economic interpretations and also kind of in search of better life. But now migration is taking place, particularly in South Asian subcontinent, South Asia, is basically because of state is becoming intolerant. State is making actually lands unlivable in Southeast states. You can see in India, Modi's government, what Modi's government is doing actually. So it's a kind of states is becoming intolerant to the people of cultural difference, to the people of religious difference. So so South Asia is actually unique. in comparison to other parts, Southeast Asia or Latin America or Southern Africa. So South Asia is unique in many, in terms of migration, cross-border movements, refugee vote, you can see. And you can say Tamil, a lot of Tamils are living in India, you know. Tamil LTT was completely crashed out. So there are a lot of cases here. Even Afghan refugees, a lot of Afghan refugees there in India, even also in Pakistan. Why? So there are the refugee situations, and a lot of people living in India in camp people. So in Bangladesh also kind of stranded Pakistanis people living in Dhaka, Mirpur Geneva camp. So you can find a lot, and also in you know, Northeast India, you can find different forms of, you know, a kind of displacement. This is called, and also you might know this Narmada Dev movement also, you know, there are a lot of hundreds, thousands of people displaced. There's kind of state-induced development programs. So you can find in Bangladesh too, even in Pakistan, even in Sri Lanka, in Bhutan, so Nepal also. This one regionally, there's kind of specificity. And the roles of South Asian states, these are last questions, I would say it's very frustrating. And the last 74th or 5th of resolution, UN General Assembly, there's a resolution, you know, adopted, and you know, surprised to know that there's only Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Maldives supported Rohingya issues, and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, you know, so this is unbelievable. In Bhutan, they abstained from signing this. So this you can understand in South Asia. I don't think South Asia is playing, actually, South Asian states are playing any proactive, any meaningful role to resolve the Rohingya crisis. And I must say, India could be actually a big actor. But, you know, India has its own geopolitical interests to, you know, establish a kind of dominance in Myanmar, to the Silk Road and, you know, eastern path of economy, and also this, you know, Southeast Asian regional, you know. So this India has its own political interest. So you can understand easily that actually it's frustrating that South Asian countries, you know, not doing any, even Southeast Asian countries, you know, in the UN resolution, except Malaysia and Indonesia, these 8 states actually supported, I mean, abstained from signing. So it's very, so you can see in actually in our Greater Asian region, even Japan is openly supporting Myanmar, you know. So I don't find any actually meaningful, substantial roles from neighboring countries, because that's what I was just telling, that's the burden sharing. So we need to share the burden, unless it will be really, what I don't want to say, Rohingya people will become a big burden for Bangladesh. But Bangladesh is not actually feeling in a way, because there are 2 reasons. Because yes, Bangladesh economy is, you know, getting bombed. It's a lot of economic progress is going on here. So Bangladesh is almost, you know, it's a big, you know, country of almost 17, 18 crore people. So 1.3 million people is not a big deal for Bangladesh. Particularly Bangladesh economy is getting is a big size, but not is, you know, Rohingya issue is not an economic issue. It's also social, political, security issues. So it will become finally a big quote unquote burden, unless global community shares the burden. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Nasir. And
So,
yes, and these are some of the pictures which when I visited there, it was there. Utpal sir, would you like to get in? If quickly make any remark, Professor Utpal?
Professor, this connection is a bit unstable actually.
I cannot
We
hear
cannot hear
actually.
you.
I
Your
cannot hear
connection is
you.
very unstable.
No problem.
Mhm. I think we can mute Professor and go ahead to the last part. So unfortunately, we are not able to hear anything.
Yes, yes. Okay, okay, no problem.
Can you hear me?
So we will just
very bad
wind up.
Yes.
Acha, there are 2 questions. There are 2 questions questions in the chat box, Professor.
Yeah.
And one question is that
We can
how
share them with
Rohingyas
Professor Nasir
participated
because
in
we are really
2015
out of
election
time. And
if they were not allowed?
Cannot hear you. I mean, Dr. June, is there almost 2 hours? We need
Yes,
to.
no problem.
I think we will wind up.
Yes, yes. I think
Sure.
he is
So we
also-
will,
why
Professor Nasir and Dr. Ken, what we'll do is we'll share the questions with you and you could take them. That would be, you could respond to them over emails as per your convenience.
Yeah, that's you can
And in continuation with what Professor Nasir also said, that the whole South Asia's policy also has been Act East policy also for quite some time, not the West. And Simi can add more. She's a IR PhD from JNU. So,
Yeah.
but Simi, why don't you just...
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. It has been a pleasure this evening from India. I take this opportunity to thank Professor Nasir Uddin, who is joining us from Bangladesh, and Dr. Ken, Associate Professor of International Development and Social Change at Clark University, who is joining us from Massachusetts, USA. Thank you very much to both our eminent guests this evening. And actually, the global spillovers, which Professor Nasir was just mentioning, it actually is leading to burden sharing. And amid the various geostrategic and geo-economic perspectives, if we see the whole Rohingya issue, the lives of the Rohingyas are actually being compromised. And what remains to be seen is that this kind of subhuman treatment does not actually spill over to disturbing or even terror activities, or even the non-state actors taking advantage of such a vulnerable position of the population here. And we really hope that the issue is realized, because as Professor said, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we are still in between the tunnel, which is yet to be seen. So thank you so much, Professors Nasir Uddin and Professor Ken, and Professor Utpal, whom unfortunately we couldn't connect because of challenges of tech glitches. I thank Team IMPRI, Counterview, CDEX, and the entire South Asian Studies Center at Impact and Policy Research Institute for joining us this evening. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk, and we look forward to having you again. And Professor Ken, your book is forthcoming in 2021. We hope that we'll be able to have a talk over the book sometime when it is published.
Yes,
I would be delighted. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We will also request Professor Nasir also.
Of course. That was what I was going to add. So thank you so much for enriching us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
You too.
Have a good evening, Professor.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.